All right. Well, welcome back to Always on the Hunt. This week's guest has spent more than 25 years building a reputation as one of AV's leading educators, trainers, and sales leaders. Joel Carroll has built his career across Extron, Atlona, WolfVision, and Mersive, helping customers, integrators, consultants, and end users understand complex technology and apply it to solve real business problems. Along the way, he's helped build award-winning training programs, served as an Infocom University adjunct faculty member, and demonstrated that education isn't just a support function. It's one of the most powerful drivers of trust, confidence, and long-term business success. Today, we're going to talk about the art of communication, simplifying complex technology without losing its magic, building trust through education, why the trusted advisor always wins over the hard sell, and how investing in relationships ultimately earns you the right to ask for business. And with all that being said, Joel, welcome to Always on the Hunt.
Awesome, Leo. Thank you for having me, man. Always good having a conversation with you.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have you. You've been somebody that I've watched and admired in this industry for a long time, and it's going to be great to kind of dive a little bit deeper into your career. It's not the most traditional career, which I think you right, but it's interesting. It's interesting because I think it's very much understanding the long game, right, and something that
Absolutely.
I always subscribe. It's something I subscribe to as well. So let's get into it. Let's get started. Like, how did you get into AV? Right, you were a theater major, is that right?
I was a technical theater major.
Okay.
It's kind of I started like some of us did. I pushed overhead carts around. I don't know if anybody remembers what those still are,
Sure.
but that's how I started in high school, right, Leo?
Right. Yeah.
And my family wanted me to go into broadcast. And of course I wanted to do theater, right? So I went to do theater. But I never got into theater. I had an opportunity pop up from an alumni from college to go work for a computer-based training company doing video editing.
Mm-hmm.
And that carried me to my next job. And then when that company folded, I saw this thing in a newspaper, I'm pretty sure, that said they're looking to hire an audio video technician.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that was 30-some years ago. I had no clue. I didn't even know it was a job. Yeah. And here I am today after starting out, getting the cuts. I still have on my arms, Leo, from sticking my hands on walls.
Right. Yeah, that's great. So let's talk about your career, because I think it's interesting that you came from a technical and training aspect, and over those 25, 30 years, right? Like all of a sudden you're a sales leader, right? So let's talk about that. Let's talk about your early days, and building the training programs, and how you feel like training is a good way of building those relationships and getting them into clients and customers and eventually, successful sales.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because it did start about the time I got into AV. The company I worked for, it was called System Source. They're still around, and they did these like quarterly events to bring in all their customers. And sure. I remember my boss at the time, Gary Norris, comes up. He goes, "Hey, Joel, you're speaking at one of these." Nobody would believe it, but I was like, "No, I'm not. Right. I don't stand in front of people. That's not what I'm going to do." Right. And, I had that opportunity and fell in love with it. And the first time that I did it, I saw a very different connection that you're able to have with people, and people came up and talked to you. And there was this idea of, what you're talking about when you stand in front of people. And it was pretty awesome. From there, I had a real opportunity to get into working with Extron. And at Extron, I was one of the trainers that I got to go around with. And in those days, training really was sales. And I still believe training is sales. But it was a different path in how you did it. And a lot of it was you go into meetings and you go visit the dealers, the end users, whoever it was. And it was talking about, their challenges or problems. I mean, granted, we had a PowerPoint deck that was 100 slides deep.
Right.
And I didn't do that. It was about going in and listening and chatting and then talking about how it solves the issue versus let me tell you all the ins and the outs and
right.
the DBs and all of that. And that's when it clicked that yes, I'm training, but I'm actually doing sales.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny.
Yep.
Like when I ran my systems integration company, especially in the very early days, my brother was a sales guy, right? He was the guy that could sell, ice Eskimos and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I would come along who, also fairly good salesperson, but I would be presented as a technical guy, right? Right. And yeah, customers will obviously trust a technical person, right? But you have to be a good, you have to be a good communicator, right? You've worked with engineers and consultants, salespeople, executives, end users. Like everybody's got to be, I think, addressed a little bit differently. How do you adapt your communication style, like when you're in front of all these different audiences?
Yeah, it's being a chameleon is what I've been told or been called by people, right? Like you walk into the room and depending on the demeanor, you match a lot of that tone and conversation. There's a book that I recommend everybody go and read, and it's Never Split the Difference. It's a phenomenal book. It's by a former FBI negotiator.
Yeah.
And I started using some of those tactics, even like he's got this radio DJ voice that depending on the room and what's going on. A lot of it is just learning as you walk in, you have to listen and you walk into the room. And once you say who you are, they're going to talk. They want to talk to you. And it's very easy to then start to match how they speak, the tonality, the speed. I remember when I first moved from the Mid-Atlantic to the Midwest, there's a difference there. And I used to speak very fast. And I had to slow down. And that was a big lesson, right? When somebody's like, you speak way too fast. So you don't do it overnight. It's some hard knocks to get there, but literally being the chameleon.
All right. And it's something that I always talk about in interviewing as well, having, being mindful of your cadence and being of your voice inflections and when you have to show energy versus when you got to take it a little bit more seriously and stuff like that. One of the things that I always pushed, when I was running my sales team was, you have to match their technical depth, right? Like if you sit down with an engineer, get into the weeds, that's fine. But if you're sitting down with an end user who's not technical, man, if you say the word, watts or ohms or whatever, just pack your stuff up, just walk out the door, you're done, right? Like,
you're done. You're out.
So what are your thoughts? How do you, I guess, how do you go about, explaining, right? These complex and simplifying the complex technology, without really losing, the magic or the luster or like the, a lot of times that, we get credited for being like wizards, right? So,
right.
So how do you simplify that technology without losing that magic?
You meet them on their level, man. I remember people would come up to me and they would ask me, what's your pitch? Right. And I'm like, well, I don't have a pitch. They're like, what do you mean you don't have a pitch? I was like, I don't, because my pitch is going to be specific to, say, you, Leo, when you walk up and have a conversation with me. Yeah, so the way that I would
keep it very simple with me.
Very simple. Yeah, exactly. That I've heard that over the years. Right. But what I do is I get to know that person, right? When you sit down. So what do you do? And what is your job? And how does technology affect you? And so through a few key questions, you start to understand exactly what their aptitude of technology is, but more importantly, what their willingness to learn technology is. And once you find out what they do and they tell you some personal things, you can literally take all of those and craft any technology that you're selling to a problem that they probably had, right? One way or the other.
Right. Tying it back to their problems and solving their problems and meeting them at their level. Absolutely. And that's where you kind of build, my favorite way of selling is becoming that trusted advisor, right? People call it consultative selling. I think it's more of a, you got to earn that trust, right? You do. To the point where they view you not as a salesperson, but all right, this person is advising me and guiding me towards making the right decisions. How do you know? First of all, how do you try to get that, and then how do you know when you have it?
Yeah, that's both are good questions. how you get it, it's not overnight, right? There are relationships that I now have had for 20 years, but to get those relationships, it took years of work to get there and trust. Cause when you work for an AV company and a manufacturer side, you're the new guy that's walking in. The first thing they do is there's a lack of trust because one, they don't know you. We used to work with the other person. And most importantly, are you just here to sell me?
Right.
And you've got to get rid of you're just here to sell me. Because today you can't even get in the door if you're just there to sell them.
Right.
So you've got to break down those barriers. And through that, it's conversation, it's learning. Leo, sometimes it's even recommending a different manufacturer's product. And I've done that.
Yeah.
Say, look, this is probably not for you because I want a longer term relationship with you. We can use this, but I would use somebody else's that. And as soon as you start to see that, they start to see that, then there's this trust that's get built. And when do you know is when they just call you to ask you a random question. It may not be about your product. It could be about technology, or it's hey, Leo, do you know somebody I could call about X? Right. And then, you've broken down that barrier, and there's a strong relationship there that you can continue to build on over the years. But you have to keep building. You can't just walk away.
Right. 100%. And, in my experience, like I had one manufacturer rep that, would come in with his bag, 20 different product lines, and all the other reps will come in and be like, here, let me show you all 20 of my lines. Let me tell you everything about, whatever.
Yeah.
And then, this one rep came in and he says to me, he's like, where are you struggling? Like which line or what area would you want to improve? And that's where we started with that one line. Right. And then he's like, what other gaps do you have in your business? Let's, and then introduce the second line, third line. And then
I almost bet I know who that is, Leo. We won't talk about it now, but I can almost guarantee I know who that is. That's awesome.
So, and that was the approach. And it, as a dealer, I'm like, all right, this guy's here to help me grow my business instead of just trying to sell me stuff. Right. But as a trusted advisor, you eventually have to go for the sale. Right.
Correct.
When do you flip that switch and how do you do that? Like, all of a sudden you go from being all this information giver to now like, all right, I call it deposits and withdrawals. Like you make all these deposits, right? Now you need the withdrawal. How do you get that withdrawal?
Well, I think that it starts in the beginning when you're building the relationship, right? People know the reason why you're there. And so that never is something they're not thinking about. We're here to see if there's an opportunity to move forward.
Right.
But it sometimes takes some time to find out what that one in is. Is it a distribution amplifier to get started? Hey, let's just give this a shot. Or do we do the whole project? Everyone's going to be slightly different depending on the conversation. So it's not just a cut and dry answer. As somebody in that field, your job is to sell, right? The entire time, even though you're a trusted advisor, you are looking to go and get a sale.
Right.
But if you go become, and I swore, Leo, this is a funny story. People are like, what got you into sales? And we'll talk through it. And I was like, and people are asking who you are and all this. And I'm like, well, I used to do training and then I did this and I was doing this and it was great and awesome. And then I became the exact thing my parents always asked me not to be. And I got into sales. Yeah. And no lie, that's not what my parents wanted me to ever do because it's a very negative connotation, right? It's go for the kill.
I don't know any 8-year-old on the playground says one day when I grow up, I'm going to be in sales, right? Right. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So, which is, all right, sorry for interrupting, but keep going with your story. Because I definitely actually want to get into your specific career as well, and how you did that. Like, how did it, at what point did it flip for you that you, like, I need to get into sales?
Well, I fought it for the longest time, right? Because I didn't want that name associated with it. And, I remember as a child going in and seeing car dealers or people knocking on doors. And I'm like, I don't want to be that guy.
Right.
And there was an individual at Atlona's, Roger Takis. He pulled me aside. He goes, look, you're a sales guy. I said, I'm not doing sales, Roger. I'm never doing sales. He goes, no, you're going to do sales. I'm like, I'm not a sales guy. And then here, after about 2 months, I'm like, all right, I'll move out of training and I'll go into sales. And what I realized, I had this magic sauce other people maybe didn't have because of my technical background, but also training and the communication skills I learned over the years. I always was doing sales. I mean, it clicked at that point. It was just a matter of, from a credit standpoint, where did the credit maybe lie? And when I got into that, I loved it because I was still helping people. I just wasn't teaching the engineers the technology. I was helping people really solve real problems. End users, dealers, consultants. And it was awesome because I used to love the aha moment, right? When you're sitting in there teaching and somebody's like, oh, that's how that works. You still get those. It's just I fixed it moment, right? We solved a problem moment. And then from there, it's just kind of taken off, right? And that was my first step into sales way back in the days at Atlona. And I'm very thankful for that transition.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's worked out pretty well. You've had a very successful career in sales. Your career, like besides that moment, like obviously going from engineering and training, sales, how do you think things have changed over time as well? Like today, right? Like how do you feel? How do you feel? In the obviously, we've had Google for a while now, but like now we have AI as well, and like in this new era, like how do you think the role has changed for the salesperson?
I think it's changed substantially. When I'd started years ago, obviously there was the internet and Google and all that stuff to some level. And you would have to talk more of kind of the speeds and feeds kind of conversation. But what you're not always getting from that today is a true how to put all the pieces and parts together to solve a problem. Right. Because of the internet, I feel it has been a little harder, especially in the manufacturer side, to get in and have some of those conversations. So that's definitely changed. The in-person communication, that's not necessarily there as much because people are quick to want to maybe do a meeting like this.
Yeah.
Because Leo, I could say, hey, I'm done and I'm out and hang up, right? We're not taking up that time. So there's been a big difference there. So learning how to adjust to, let's call it the technological change we've had in the sales process and even in how we do meetings, that's been a challenge for all of us. COVID was, I think, that final catalyst that really, closed that door. And this is how we're going to communicate to start.
Right. I always feel like in person, right? Like face-to-face meetings, there's something about being face-to-face, eye contact, shaking hands and stuff like that, that builds a connection. Plus I feel like it shows the client how much you value them, that you're willing to get on a plane and get out there and meet with them. But obviously the client's like, man, I don't want to waste half a day on you either. Like, can you come in for an hour, get in and out, right? Which is really nice with Teams and Zoom. So obviously COVID, everything became a Zoom meeting or Teams meeting, right? And travel, I think, 50% went down to 30% or 20, well, obviously with COVID, it went down to 0, but afterwards.
People were doing only 50% travel, Leo. How is that possible?
Well, right. But it's even dropped even more, right? Like it's how do you build those relationships, right? You're the trusted advisor. You're all about relationship building. A lot of that comes from face to face, and now all of a sudden you're not doing that. Like, what were you doing?
I was doing the same thing a lot of people were doing, doing the same meetings. I amped them up a bit. Like in the old house I had a studio. My wife had a studio. We had green screens downstairs. The way that I would do the meetings was drastically different than most people. So there was some interest and excitement, and the demos were still live. It was different. When you're doing it like that, I almost feel like you have to, overplay things just a little bit to keep people paying attention, right? Cause you're on camera at that point, edutainment, if you will, in some of those cases.
Sure.
But again, it comes back to listening and understanding and taking the time to actually know what's going on with that customer. And what I have found is when you have that in-person meeting, if it's the first one or the 10th, it doesn't really matter because it was an even more strong, focused, and positive in-person meeting than before, where I'd be like, hey, Leo, can I just come in and see you? What do you guys have going on? There's purpose now behind the meeting because we got a lot of the stuff out of the way on the call. And so it does give you I think a advantage where you can build relationships faster because you're getting a lot of the customary stuff that you do done like this versus an hour in each meeting. So I've enjoyed that. I actually have.
Good. you mentioned your wife, right? So,
Yeah.
every industry has a power couple, right? There's Jay-Z and Beyonce, and Taylor and Travis, and I think the AV industry has Joel and Erica, right? So,
Well,
but
we appreciate that.
so like, look, both of you have built incredible careers, great reputations, very well known, very well respected. Uh, you've worked together multiple times, right?
Correct. Yes.
How's that been? Like, it's not every day that husband and wives work together.
It's mostly people say, I don't know how you do it. And I love it. It's when we met, we obviously weren't married at that point. We started
Right.
out as coworkers, and then over time, I guess I'm a really good salesman, Leo, because I convinced her
Yeah.
to marry this mug, right?
Right. That's the best deal you ever
Yeah.
closed, right?
Yeah. Don't know what problem I solved for her. I probably caused more still, but the it is fabulous having that opportunity. It does take a very specific type of relationship, and I do
Yeah.
know that. We can both be sitting in a room, and you wouldn't know we're married.
Right.
You just wouldn't. The way that we operate, and even when we've worked at the same company, somebody might say, "Hey, you're a wife or your husband." I'm like, both of us are like, "No, 5 o'clock." But
Yeah.
during the day, we will
Right.
disagree, we will agree, and we help each other grow. So there's a lot of strengths that she has that I definitely don't have, and I know there's strengths that I have, probably one that she may not have.
Right.
But it helps us grow through that, and I really do attribute a lot of the success of my career from having conversations with her and to think about things from a different perspective. And I love to have the conversations even more so because it's not the traditional two guys sitting down having a conversation. It's somebody that's taking it from even a female perspective.
Right.
And that alone, the majority of the people in my career that really have helped me over the years have been female, and,
Right.
Great friends and
Yeah.
support. It's been awesome.
Yeah, look, the women in our industry are amazing.
Yes,
Whenever
absolutely.
I get an opportunity to represent, a candidate that's female, I'm excited because, obviously, male dominated industry. Some companies have the old boys networks, right, and old boys clubs.
Yeah.
And for any female to be successful in this space, they just have to be that good, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it just comes with the territory. But so, when you and Erica are like job searching and in between roles, like, do you look for opportunities to like pull each other in, or do you guys ever like hesitant, like, maybe we shouldn't, work together, or what?
It's anytime I have an opportunity to work for her or with her, I would. And she would do the same. Right now she has her own organization that's called Charbet Strategies. And predominantly it's working on building training curriculum for audio video manufacturers.
Right.
And it's been awesome watching her with that. In the interim, I've been helping her with the sales side of it, trying to understand what you want. I put together a lot of the contractual documents and all these other things for her over the last few months. So it makes it much easier for her to go and have that conversation. And then since we've been doing it, it's like, what else do we want to do? Do we want to work with small companies, not as a rep firm, but help them understand how to do business in the US? We've had some great conversations around that, and her marketing and training background, and the training is where we kind of overlap. She's great at content creation and building, good at presenting. Presentation is where I'm strongest, not necessarily in the content building. And then the sales side, we've had some really good conversations. So we're always kind of watching out for each other, whether it be at Charbet or other companies. I've never recruited her anywhere. If somebody knows her, and most people will, when I show up somewhere, then they go, "Hey, does your wife want to maybe come along?"
Right. Nice.
You call her.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because like I ran a family business, and my dad was a technical person, the engineer, and my brother was the salesperson, right? I was the operations, and but our mom was a realtor, right? And she was our secret weapon behind the scenes, doing, making all the introductions to all the builders and this and that. So it was great to always have that, person. So you mentioned 5 o'clock, like, I'm sure you guys, don't punch out at 5, but like after work, like, how do you guys turn it off? Like at dinner, do you guys have like a rule saying, hey, when we're off the clock, we're off the clock, or is it 24/7?
Yeah, I'm not so good at the turning it off part, Leo.
Yeah.
Erica is. So it's hard. I mean, at dinner, phones go down. I mean, that's important.
Yeah.
We put our
Right.
phones away to have conversations. If we're out at restaurants or something like that, there's nothing that's going to be that critically important that
Right.
I have to answer right away. So we make sure that we spend that time together, and weekends are very valuable to us because that's weekends. I'm able to put it down much more
Right.
than other times. And my mom's always like, you're always on adventures. I'm like, cause that's the time if I'm doing something, then I'm not necessarily just all work. My mind's busy doing the thing. We started doing pottery last fall together.
Nice.
Right. So when I'm there, there's nothing you can do but concentrate at that thing that's on front of you on the wheel, and everything else quietly goes away. Right. It's hard for me. It's not as hard for her, but she's got a plethora of information in her head. So I always want to get it and ask and, collaborate on stuff.
Take advantage of the ultimate trusted advisor, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. When you look back through your career, right, and train thousands of people, right, put together all this content and all these different things, what lessons did you learn? Like what have you learned? What have you thought back and like, man, like I needed to do this better, or over the time, here's how I've evolved.
Yeah, I think being initially a trainer in front of people, your tendency was to always control the meeting. Your tendency was always to do the presentation whenever you were doing the thing, which is great for that role. But as you got more and more into sales, listening becomes much more key and important. And I know that there were a couple different projects that didn't go the right way, and it was my fault. I didn't necessarily listen to what they were looking for, or even the meeting failed because I didn't hear what they were talking about clearly. Right. And I went another direction, and, we maybe didn't get brought back. I tend to talk a lot. And so for me, it's a challenge, and I work hard at not speaking. Nobody believes I go into a meeting and don't talk, right. But when you're there with me, it's listening. And I think the other big one I learned over time, it doesn't have to be all business all the time. Mm-hmm. As you're building that relationship, there was a call a few years ago, and I had a couple junior guys on the call with me, and it's a 30-minute call. And we're just talking. I've known the customer for a long time. And we're talking, Leo, and how's this? And, oh, you're retiring. And, oh, how's your wife? And how are the kids? That was 25 minutes of the 30-minute call. And then 5 minutes of the business at the end. And they're like, yeah, well, I'll get the PO sent over. And the guy's like, the junior guy's like, what are you doing? Yeah. You earn that opportunity to have that conversation. And that was key. So, not always being business and listening are probably the two biggest lessons that I still have to work on every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I one of the reasons why I got into recruiting, right? Again, there's not a lot of 8-year-olds that on the playground say, hey, one day I'm going to be a headhunter, right?
That's true, Leo.
Right? And yeah, no, I was never expecting to be in this chair, but when I was given that opportunity and thought through, I'm like, this is a great way of staying in the industry, connecting with people, helping people, advance their careers, and helping companies find the right talent and stuff like that. So it's always like, to me, it's always about people, right? It's always about helping and growing and stuff like that. So, and we just got back from Infocom, right?
Yes.
I walk around, to bump into people. I walk into booths, kind of check things out, but I'm not there for the tech. But tell me, tell me what your thoughts were on this year's Infocom. Like, what would you see, do, hear? Like, what are your thoughts on the industry at this point?
Yeah, so for me, it was a different Infocom than normal, and I had a lot of time to get to walk around, and I found it hard to walk around, honestly. And the reason is if I had a booth I wanted to go see, and let's say it's on the other side of the hall, I'm going to work my way back. It might take me over an hour to get from one side of the hall over to the other. And a lot of it was, people grabbing me or saying hello, or, I go, squirrel, I want to go talk to that person. I feel the technology is still central to why we go to the event, right? That's why we all do come together. But I felt this year, and maybe it's just because it was a little different for me, the relationships were even that much more key.
Yeah.
And there were still discussions about the technology. I think all the manufacturers did a really good job for the most part of making it an experiential booth, not just a bunch of things on the wall that talk about the ins and the outs. It's like, why are you doing this? And how does that provide value? And those conversations were awesome. So I felt this year really started to be more people oriented one way or the other.
Yeah. Look, everyone, again, maybe it's my angle, but like everyone I talk to treat it like it's a family reunion, right? Like
100%.
You get to go see your former coworkers, your colleagues, your clients that you don't get to see on a daily basis. And so
you might only see them once a year.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, most of the conversations don't even happen in the booths or in the aisles, right? Like,
yes.
So it's a great time. I always enjoy InfoComm. Of course, come out of there exhausted, but it's good and tiring. I worry a little bit about the innovation, right? I feel like we're plateauing a little bit as an industry. Any thoughts there?
Well, innovation kind of comes in waves, right? And there were over the 25, 30 years that I've been doing this, you've seen this innovation and then plateau and then an innovation and plateau, and sometimes even maybe a dip. I'm not too concerned right at the moment, as right now there's a lot of concentration still on collaborative spaces and meetings and things along those lines. I think the innovation is going to come in ways that we haven't necessarily expected. And it could be in the software side of things and how the software is interacting with the hardware. Hardware is always going to be here. You're going to need something to run it. But I think there's a lot of innovation still to come. I know that the key word a lot of people talk about is AI, and some people love the concept. Some people hate the concept, but I do feel that AI is going to take what we do and elevate it. I don't necessarily think it's going to replace jobs. I think I think it will replace how we do certain things.
Sure. 100%.
And it will lead to customer experience. Customer experience right now is what I think most manufacturers are really paying attention to. I mean, look, a DA is a DA, right? There's not much more innovation you're going to be able to add to that. But what if the DA fails and it has a way to have a communication and it pinpoints right to the exact issue, so somebody could maybe self-serve? And, I think we plateaued only for a short period of time, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with you on the AI thing. I think it's going to cut some jobs, right? Like with people being more efficient, you're not going to need as many people to do the same type of jobs. For bigger organizations, smaller organizations, you're still going to need the headcount.
Right.
But I feel like, and somebody gave me the great analogy about like the typewriter. The typewriter never got rid of the secretary. It just got rid of the secretaries that couldn't type. So it's just like,
that's an interesting way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a tool. It's a tool to make you more efficient, better at your job and stuff like that. You've been around, you've seen a lot from a lot of different angles, like people coming into this industry, what advice would you give them?
Get to know people. We were able to go to a small event. There was only about 10 people that were there for the event. And it was purposely small. And there was a individual, I can't remember what school that he was from, but it was his first InfoComm ever. And he walks in, and I remember my first InfoComm years ago, and eyes wide open, and they had projector shootouts. Okay, today the InfoComms are much cooler, right, with the big video walls and all that. Right. But he just had these eyes wide open, and he couldn't believe how awesome everybody was, and talking to him and introducing him to people and all these other things. The biggest advice I would have as people come in, it is a community, without a doubt. No matter what. I mean, somebody told me it was Hotel California, right? Like once you're in, you can't get out.
100%.
And use that to your advantage. Meet people, get introduced to people. And then once you meet them, reach out to them every once in a while. I really feel that's going to be where a lot of people have that opportunity to grow. And don't be embarrassed. I think some of the people coming in are embarrassed when they go and they ask a question or want to introduce themselves to somebody who, is old and gray and has been around, for 100 years. And they're like, oh, well, can you tell me? Don't worry about it. We're all there to support each other and help each other. And I think that's where this industry has always kind of had my heart, is because of that community. and growing people. My son just joined the industry a few years ago, and he works for a great company. Has been very supportive of him, and he's met certain people. And it's kind of funny. Dad, do you know so-and-so? I'm like, yeah, I think I know so-and-so. And, it's interesting seeing him slowly, grow because he's learning and meeting people along the way. But that's my biggest advice is learn the technology, but know the people, get to know who they are. And if you have a problem, there's always going to be somebody out there that can help guide you in how to address that situation.
Yeah, very, very, very well said. Because like I feel like this is one of those industries that there's a lot of characters, but very few egos, right? Like a lot
Yes.
of
Yes.
here you are, you've held big titles, but you're very approachable. People can come up to you and reach out to you, and you're always open and giving and stuff like that. And but speaking of which, like I run into a lot of sales engineers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or system designers, and they, the ones with the personality, right? Like that can be in front of people, but they're always afraid to make that jump into sales. What would you tell them? Like, what would you?
So I think everybody's afraid to jump into sales for a couple different reasons. And a lot of time it's because of the commission structure, right? Mm-hmm. Like what happens when I go here? Because there's potentially going to be a cut, right? Because your base is going to go down and all of that. It's don't be afraid. I did it. And I know I went through the same struggles and the same concerns, but the number one thing I would say is don't stare at your number. If you stare at your number, you're not doing it right. If you're building the relationships and finding ways to solve the problems, over time, you're going to be blowing your number out the water. Yeah. It's just going to happen.
I would tell you that the number is what actually is more than the compensation and the mm-hmm. commission. It's the quota. It's right.
It's the quota.
It's being responsible for that quota and be like, oh my God, what if I don't hit my number? I'm going to get fired, blah, 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 whatever.
Right. Right. And that's a reality. It could happen. And depending on the company that you're at, they may or may not, do what you just said and you're no longer there, but there's another opportunity. And I think the sales engineers or the engineers that are out there, they've got this. Some of them, they're extremely quiet, or some of the best salespeople I've ever met in my entire life. Yeah. And they've got this skill set where they can really do it all.
Right.
And the ones that are never the smartest ones in the room, even though they win hands down every single time.
That's interesting. Explain that a little bit further.
So it's, when you look at it, it's like you go in and people are going to be disagreeing on technology, especially when you get into a room. You've got the network engineer and the AV engineer and the salespeople and all of that. But being able to listen and be the person that can stitch every single one of those together into a cohesive solution is key. And you don't do it by telling everybody else they're wrong, even if they are. You do it by listening, finding your angle to have a discussion and go, well, what if we did it this way, and this way? And you say it in such a way, and people craft this and they're phenomenal at it, where they're like, wait, you're not just a sales guy. You know what you're talking about. And then there's a totally different level of respect there because now you are a technical advisor, not just an advisor on a problem. You can also provide technical depth and aptitude if you need to.
Yeah. I agree. Like I talk to sales engineers all the time, and I'm like, so what do you do? Well, I go and I find out all the customer needs. Then I put the quote together, and then I go out there and I present it. I answer all the questions. I redo the designs if there's any changes, and then I'm there for the close. I'm like, what does the sales guy do? It's like, he gets the meeting. It's like you're doing 90% of the work. Like might as well get the commission check too, right?
That's what I did at the integrator years ago when I was there, and I didn't realize that's what I was doing. Right, I was just doing my thing and having the conversation, and it wasn't until years later, looking back, I'm like, oh, it kind of wasn't in sales, right, back in the day. So it was. You're right about that. It's fun.
Yeah. All right. And then the last question, we'll wrap up, but wanted to, so we gave advice to new people coming in, and then we, gave advice to sales engineers that might want to jump to sales. Mm-hmm. How about yourself? Like if you were going to talk to yourself from 25 years ago, what advice would you give yourself now? Like,
wow. For 25 years ago, I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give myself is probably to take time for yourself, right? And once I'm in, and I'm a hard worker, and I always will be a hard worker. But making sure, and I didn't start doing this until the last few years, where I would actually go on vacations and my phone
Right.
would, I don't know if it was shut off or taken away, Leo. I think most of the time it was taken away.
Yeah.
But having that opportunity to actually refresh and relax and get your mind back where you need it to be so you continue to be productive, and not only for the company you work for, but productive for you yourself and the goals that you want to achieve. I mean, working 20-hour days like I had to back in the day, I never had to. I just did. That would probably have been the best piece of advice I would have given myself. My hair might be a different color. I might have a little more hair now if that's the case.
Yeah.
But that's what I would have said to myself.
Right. That's good. That's good. You know, it's funny. My wife used to book our vacations on cruise ships only.
Yes.
You know, and I'm like, why do you love cruising so much? I'm like, let's just go to an all inclusive or whatever. Let's go to lay on the beach. And she's like, no. She's like, cruise ships are the only place where there wasn't Wi-Fi, right? You know, so
yes, they've messed that up for us, Leo. Now there's Wi-Fi.
There's Wi-Fi now, right?
But that honestly, that's why Erica would book cruises for us once we got married.
Yeah,
because I had no cell service then, really, at that point, even. So it was beneficial.
You had to unplug. You had to unplug. But cool.
Absolutely.
Joel, look, I appreciate you joining me, and sharing all your wisdom. I think you have a very unique story and career. It's been great. I look forward to seeing your next great adventure, and appreciate the time this morning. And
absolutely.
And then to the listeners, thanks for joining us. You know, hopefully you're still here, and if you are, thank you, and please click that like, subscribe, 5-star review button, and share as well. And till next week, good luck on all your hunts.